I've been working this for about 2.5 years to get to this point. We're breaking ground right now. The project will be modular. Hang on a sec. You need to, no. Sorry, kids. We've been working this project for about 2.5 years. We're just breaking ground right now. The whole project will be, except for the first building that we're building now as site built, the rest will be modular. And the modular company that we're working with is already building mods, and we are hoping to start setting mods in September with the goal to have this entire project set and complete by early part of next year. We've already gotten quite a bit of interest on this project. We have about 25 folks signed up who would like to buy these units. We're pretty excited about it. And Christina, if you want to flip to the next slides, there we could show a couple other photos. There's the one site-built building, which is under construction now. And then next to it, we have started excavation. She has an interesting note there about some of the deed restrictions. Sorry, go back one slide. For ownership, the income restriction only applies to the first 5 years. After that, the income restriction does not apply, so that if you bought this, you could sell this to somebody at market rate and realize the kind of market gains and market appreciation, which is nice. The locals only requirement will be in perpetuity. Next slide. There's a couple more construction photos. You can see kind of that bottom left. The site, the buildings you see there that are existing, that was some affordable housing that Martis Camp built a number of years ago for their requirements. And we are now using up the rest of the site for this project. Next slide.
Those were the only slides I have.
Yep. So there you go. That's the gist of the project. So good question. There is not a lottery. It's first come, first serve. So like I said, right now we have about 25 folks on the list, which would leave us with about 15 more. I have a feeling that once people start seeing mods being set and houses popping up in 60 days from now, those last 15 units will disappear pretty quick. Emily's got a good question. The total construction timeline. So we're going to be, I think, less than 12 months all in from when we break ground to when we have everything complete, which is pretty phenomenal for 68,000 square feet or so of buildings. Uh, 1031 exchange. I don't see why you couldn't do a 1031 exchange as long as the owner who is actually taking title meets the qualifications. You can rent these out. So if you were an owner and you qualified, you could buy this and you could rent this out as long as the renter also qualified. So there's a bunch of different ways where we can, get locals in these places. I don't know what you mean there, Charles, about those who are locked into leases. If they live somewhere else, they're going to have to deal with getting out of their current housing situation.
Daniel, maybe you can talk a little bit about how this is such a unique and one of a kind opportunity for our region, in that it's a home buyer opportunity and that it serves AMI up to 180.
Sure. I mean, this is going to be the first for sale product that is both income restricted and locals only, and having an employment deed restriction. So it's pretty cool that you actually be able to buy a home versus a lot of the other projects that are coming online locally are all for rent. So the idea here is let's try and create something that families really can move into. And we've gotten a pretty wide range of interested parties, from people who work for local construction companies and landscape companies, and you name it, a bunch of employees in Martis Camp, And so I think a lot of those people are pretty excited to have the opportunity to actually own a house. And if they stay there for more than 5 years, who knows what these things could be worth someday. But the hope is they can, own an asset and build some equity. Yeah, on your question there, these were ended up being, I mean, we're actually still dealing with I actually don't know what the price is per square foot because we are still dealing with that. But we're probably going to be pushing $300 a foot for sure in construction costs.
And to answer Kim's question in the chat, they are still accepting applications. Kim, I'll put the link on how to apply in the chat for you. And then it looks like Tara has responded to Charles. And Jan has one more question. How do you price a home in this project?
So we basically, when we started this project, we worked backwards and said, okay, what are these going to cost to build? I based this off another similar project that I'm doing that we started a couple years ago called Spring Creek, which is over by the middle school. And we based a lot of our pricing on that model. And now that's a little bit coming back to bite us because prices have gone up so much. But we kind of worked backwards and we said, okay, what are these going to cost to build? How do we sell this for less than 600, less than 500K? What does the land need to cost? And what is the AMI that individual could qualify for? And we just kind of ended up, we started at 550. We're actually raising the price to 575 just to cover the increase in construction costs in the last year. And so that's kind of how we came up with that price. And the goal was, how do we keep this as low as possible? How do we price this as affordably as possible? Yeah, they're about 1,700 square foot per unit. So each building is 3,400 square foot roughly. And they're quite nice. There's a little kind of bonus room on the ground floor, nice kitchen, living area, a one-car garage, and then upstairs there are 2 bedrooms with a shared bath and then a master suite that has an in-suite bathroom. And they have real backyards. There will be these 40 units plus the 10 existing units. So there'll be basically 50 homes in this little cul-de-sac. And I think it's going to be a pretty nice little community. They'll have, roughly 200 residents there.
2-car garages?
1-car garage.
I just want to draw attention to the chat. Emily Setzer is of Placer County, and she just made mention that the price is still at $550,000 per their agreement with Martis Valley, Placer County, and the developers. So just leaving that there, and then maybe you can respond to Jay Garb.
Oh, sure. So there's
question of.
Yeah, there are 3 different exterior elevations. If you go back to that 2 slides previous, you can see kind of the street view, and we have 3 different roof lines. So there's a flat roof, a shed roof, and kind of a gable roof. One slide there, that number 7, there you go. There's kind of the rendering of the street, and you can see what the 3 different roof pitches will be. So we tried to, create some architectural interest in the community and not have every single unit be identical. The floor plans are all identical.
Will the applicants be assigned a specific unit, or will we get to select at the first come, first served basis?
They're going to be based on when they're completed and based on when somebody is in line, basically. So they'll be allocated on a first come, first served basis based on what number somebody's in line and when the unit's complete.
So there are a lot of questions in the chat, Daniel. I don't know if you're able to.
I lost the chat.
So I think the next one is, can you speak more to the modular part of the project?
Well, I mean, the whole structures are going to be modular. So there are 8 boxes per building. We will do all the siding on site and all of the roofing and exterior finishes, and 100% of the interior finishes will be completed at the factory. So it's going to I mean, I have at this factory, there's roughly 300 guys working on a daily basis. I probably have a third or half of those dedicated just to this project. So we have a lot of people right now working, I would say a lot more resources than we could probably leverage up here locally. And it's going to drastically increase or drastically reduce the construction time. Doesn't really save cost, but it does save a lot of time. Question there, can we get to choose the exterior design? There's 6 different exteriors that we have. There's basically an A, a B, and a C, and then we have those finishes flipped. So we have kind of an, you know, a 1A and a 2A and a 1A, 1B and a 2B, if you will, and a 1C and a 2C. So there's 6 exteriors, 3 different roof lines, which will make for just a nice variation.
Well, thank you. Oh, it looks like there's another one coming in. So Haley is asking, with the timeline you spoke of previously, will the first 10 people on the list be getting into their homes at the same time as everyone else on the list?
No, there would be, because we will be setting these in phases. So we will be planning to set the first phase sometime in September. We'll probably be setting about 6 buildings or so, which is 12 units. And then we will start finishing those. Then the next 6 will show up in another month after that, and the next 6 or so, 7 in a month after that. So they will be rolled out in phases, and people first on the list will get their units first.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, owners will purchase using regular lending mechanisms. So all applicants have still got to go through review by Placer County and by a lender and show that they can qualify.
If you visit Placer County's website, the link that both Tara and I put in the chat box, you'll see more information about that. And it looks like Jan has another question.
No, I mean, we're building this to code. Basically, again, we're trying to, the challenge with this project has been, how do you build something and sell it for this price point? We are being required to put solar panels on these, which, you know, we're probably looking at $1 million kind of number to put solar on this project, which is required. So we are doing that. So there's a lot of things. I think the state's requirements are pretty stringent at this point. They are continually increasing. And so we're meeting whatever those requirements are. Applicants do not need to use a specific lender. We are suggesting Tri-County's Bank, who's a local lender, and I can connect people with the lady Lori Jane over there, who's handling most applicants, but applicants are certainly welcome to bring their own lender. We are as the developer, and we are acting as the realtor. We're trying to minimize all of the extra overhead for this project. So there should be very minimal closing fees, which the seller would pay anyway. The bulk of those fees the seller would pay.
Thank you, Daniel. So Daniel was just answering the last question in the chat box. And it looks like we have one more from Haley. So
I'm hoping we're going to have the first units done by the end of this year. And then maybe, you know, each phase would be 1 to 2 months after that. I would love to be completely finished and wrapped up by, you know, April, May of next year. Don't hold me to that, but that's our goal.
I'm going to pause here because every time I pause, more questions come in the chat. So if you do have any more questions for Daniel, you can put them in the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature, which you can find under reactions at the bottom panel of your screen. Or you can simply take yourself off mute. Are there any more questions for Daniel? Or comments by anyone joining us today?
Looks like a fantastic project.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been, it's pretty cool to see it actually finally happening after talking about it for, like I said, last 2.5 years. We still have a few more hurdles to get over, but it's happening.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, and it's okay if more come up, after Steve's presentation, we'll open it up again for questions about Silver Creek. And then if you do have any additional questions about housing in general or about Hopkins Village, you can ask after Steve's presentation. And so it's with great pleasure that I get to introduce Steve Frisch. He is the president and founding member of Sierra Business Council. Over the last 20 years, Sierra Business Council has leveraged more than $100 million of investment in the Sierra Nevada and its communities through community and public-private partnerships. Building on his expertise, Steve is providing technical assistance and access to capital with the developers of Silver Creek. So thank you for joining us, Steve. I'm going to pass the torch over to you and let you give us an overview of this project.
Great, thanks, Christina, and nice to see so many friends on the phone today. So one of the projects that we've been working on for the last roughly year is a project called Silver Creek Estates, which is located just off Brockway Road. And I'm going to share a site plan with you in just a minute. But I wanted to give you a little bit of the history behind the project and Sierra Business Council's role in this project, because it's a little unique compared to what's been happening in the region. So the developer of the project is a gentleman named Reza Shera, who lives primarily in San Diego, but also has a home in Lahontan. He's done about 150 projects in California, Colorado, North Carolina, and South Carolina over the past 30 years. Most of those projects have been some combination of multifamily residential for rent and single family for sale products, although he also has experience developing some commercial properties, up to about 30 to 50,000 square foot commercial properties across the country. And in the last couple of years, he's really begun to focus very closely on this kind of locals affordable community housing issue, because it is raised to the top, both in San Diego where he lives and here where he makes his second home. At the same time he purchased this property, he also purchased 3 other properties across the North Shore of Lake Tahoe. So there are 3 other projects that he's working on at this time that are in the Placer County jurisdiction. But the project I'm talking about today is within the town of Truckee. So for the last year, we've been providing Reza with technical assistance through funding we received from the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, or GoBiz. That funding is directed towards interventions in specific communities in order to spur economic development. So we made the case that there's a direct nexus between housing and housing availability and economic sustainability and resilience. Thus, we should be able to use what's called their Technical Assistance Expansion Program funding to provide technical assistance to housing developers. The role that we've played for Reza has been, number one, to act as a community navigator, that is introducing him to contractors and engineers and planning officials and other people who are necessary to make a project work. Number two, work with him to crunch the data to figure out what cohort of housing need within the town of Truckee this project could meet. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Then work with the development team on essentially incorporating elements of the project that would help it qualify for additional kind of financing opportunities later on down the line. Work with them to navigate the local development code and political process to understand what sorts of concessions, incentives, or financing might be available. And then finally, just kind of act as an ombudsman for them to move the project forward. This is a role that Sierra Business Council is playing with 4 different housing developers in the region right now. So the project itself is located, wow, look, you can see all the windows I have open. I shouldn't let you guys see that. The project itself is located just off Brockway Road. directly behind the Cedar House. So you guys, to orient you guys, the Cedar House would be right here, Brockway Road would be right here, and Winter Creek, the Winter Creek subdivision is immediately to the west of it. So this is a 1.7 acre lot just off of Winter Creek Loop. And it was previously kind of planned for multifamily residential. So the project itself it's a different product than what Daniel is working on. This is really intended to be a for rent project, but to fit that cohort of people living in the community that are making up to 160% area median income. So this is kind of the type of unit that you could populate before you're moving on to a for sale product. So it's 40 units for rent, multifamily residential on 1.7 acres. 20 of the units are 1 bedroom, 18 of the units are 2 bedroom, and 2 of the units are 3 bedroom units. 8 of the units are deed restricted at 80% AMI or below. And the intent is that the remaining units, so the other 32 units, would be deed restricted locals only at 160% AMI or below, and that deed restriction and locals only provision would be permanent. So, it's the intent that these be used for locals at 160 or below in perpetuity. So, so most of the parking for the parking for the project is split. Some of the 2 bedroom and 1 bedroom units have garages, but there's, as you can see, a decent amount of parking along one edge of the property that is not covered. So so there's some internal parking and some external parking on the project. And then there are a number of provisions that we're working on the project right now to go a little above and beyond the current local Title 24 building code for sustainability measures. So one of them is pre-wiring a number of the parking spaces to be converted to EV spaces as EVs begin to permeate the market. So we're planning at least 8 EV parking spaces, but actually wiring the system so that we could expand to all EV parking later on down the line. We're also, as Daniel is, including solar as a source, but we're in the process right now of doing a cost benefit analysis of going 100% electric on the project, which would be powered by a combination of solar, ground source heat pump, and battery backup. So, so we're working through that process right now to figure out the tax credits that are a potential for covering that part of the cost. And we're not positive whether or not we're going to be 100% solar yet or not. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about the financing for the project. The price for construction is right around $200 per square foot. It is also going to be a modular product. The cost of construction is roughly $17 million. So with a combination of the, when you look at the internal rate of return on the project itself, we have about a $2 to $2.5 million gap in the financing, depending upon construction material costs right now. Daniel mentioned that as well. As many of you know, construction material costs have been varying quite a bit for the last several months. They spiked, they're beginning to come down. So we're working on the final pro formas right now to figure out what the actual kind of gap in cost of construction is going to be. The current status of the project is that the development application and the plan development application have been submitted to the Town of Truckee. They're in review right now. So we're responding to several of the comments that the town has made to date and working on kind of answering some of those questions. It is the developer's intent to answer all of those questions in the next 2 months. We are working with local entities to look at the permanent deed restriction instruments and to enter into a permanent deed restriction program for the property. We would anticipate that the questions that the town has will be answered within the next 2 months, and that the environmental review process and the approval process will likely begin this fall. It would be our intent to break ground sometime this summer, the next summer. So that's kind of where we are on it. Happy to entertain any questions and stop sharing.
Thank you for that great overview, Steve. That was so helpful to learn all the components of the project, including the timeline. So if you do have a question, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom, or please put your question in the chat box.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's actually really interesting about the issues we're going through in town right now is that I think there is a perception that there's a lot of 80% AMI and below for rent housing available out there. As we're getting preliminary data in from the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, what we're seeing is that there are actually a number of gaps here. There is still an 80% AMI and below gap, even though the perception in the community is that we've built a lot of that housing. There is still a need for more, but there's a really big gap between 80% and 160% in both for rent and for sale products. And, you know, Dan's product goes up to 180%. We see the gap extending that far as well. So really, like, one of the really interesting questions I think that for the community to think about is going to be, how do we fill these niches strategically over time so that people have essentially a housing opportunity to fit their economic condition, so that they can move from for rent housing to for sale products and begin to build wealth in the community, which is really what we want to do. Is we want to create what is essentially kind of a pathway to building wealth and buy-in, you know, in the community. So this product is really intended to be one of those bridging products. So.
Thank you. Just to clarify, and I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, but by saying that the rents go up to 160% AMI, the rents for, the income limits go up to 160% AMI. The rents will be restricted to 30% of income, or can you explain a little bit more about what the rent structure
so the
will
rent
be?
would be calculated based on 30% of 160% of area median income for whatever the size of the household is, right? So a studio theoretically could be populated by 2 people, right? The 1 bedrooms will likely be calculated at a 2-family or a two person income, right? So it's kind of the standard calculation methodology for household income as well. So.
Thank you. And that way people aren't overburdened by their rent and
Yeah.
are on the pathway to home ownership, like you said. It looks like Billy has a question. Billy asked when the application process will begin.
Well, not until we have a certificate of occupancy, which I would anticipate will not be until probably fall of 2022 at the best case scenario. If this project could be built, or 2 of the 4 buildings could be built in a single season, at the earliest, it would be fall of 2022, but most likely mid-year 2023.
That's occupied or applications?
Applications.
Oh, applications wouldn't
But we
open
can't
until.
take applications until we get a certificate of occupancy. So, and, you know, considering the time, you know, where we are in this year, I don't think there's any way we can break ground on this project until after April 15th next year.
Thank you. That's helpful. And Jan is asking, can you estimate what total cost per square foot is, combined land and construction? Which I think you have.
Yeah, it's $200 a square foot, Jan. We hedged up just a little bit when we did the pro forma calculation. It was 196. So we're submitting it based on a pro forma based on $200 a square foot with a 10% contingency. And that's largely, as Daniel mentioned, not because the modular product is cheaper, but because it shortens the timeline for the project itself.
Does that answer your question, Jan?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Did you mention what the rent is expected to be? Or I guess it's tied to the AMI, isn't it?
Yeah, we're assuming we're gonna need to do a new AMI calculation before certificate of occupancy, so. But the interesting thing is, of course, at 160% AMI, someone can do the calculation while I'm talking. I don't have it in front of me. For a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom unit, that is still likely to be quite hefty. That's going to probably be $1,800 to $2,100 a month. Which, in my experience in the community right now, is that if people could find something for $1,800 a month, they'd be super happy.
And something that's only 30% of their rent. I think people
Yeah.
are very happy, as we're seeing that most people spend 40% of their income on rent. Are there any more questions? Are there any questions for Hopkins Village or just in general?
There's no website where people can stay plugged in just yet to keep an update on the progress of Silver Creek, right?
No, we'll be doing that after we get after we have formally submitted a completed application based on the town's feedback. So we're still in that process now of getting kind of feedback from different town departments on things that we need to consider. So we will be putting up a Squarespace site based on the site once that occurs. I think the biggest unanswered question right now that we're struggling with is doing the cost benefit calculation of going 100% electric, because that could change our pro forma by as much as $1 million the way we're currently looking at it. So.
Oh, wow. Okay, thanks, Steve. We'll just keep people updated as you keep us updated.
Yeah. I mean, clearly this project is in a very different position than Daniel's, and that it hasn't even formally been, well, it's been a pre-application that has been submitted, but it hasn't formally been submitted yet.
Right.
So there is a question in the chat box from Haley confirming the price. And so I'd just like to confirm with the agreement with Placer County as is right now is $550,000 per unit, and any further negotiations that we'll keep people updated later, but that is the contractual agreement. I don't know if Emily or Dan would like to add anything more.
No.
Okay. And Mountain Housing Council does have projects in the works on our website where you can get more information about the upcoming housing projects opening in our area. We also track housing units. We track based on what is completed, under construction, approved, pre-approved, and on hold. I can drop that link in the chat box for you. It's a good resource, as well as the projects in the works page for contact information. Well, we are not held to 1 p.m., so we can end earlier if needed. This is very exciting, and I just want to really extend my gratitude again to Daniel and to Steve for joining us today to give us more information. This is the third session that we are hosting on housing projects, and in the first session, we received a lot of questions from the community asking about different housing product types and housing available for a full range of need. And so this really helps us understand what's available in the area, and hopefully we can go out and educate others.
Out of curiosity, Christina, what are the
Yeah.
next two you're gonna do? You said this was the second and three?
This was actually our third of three.
Oh.
So the first one we focused on the Pacific Commons, which will be the affordable housing project at the old CHP site, Dollar Creek. And I need to look it up because I'm trying to blank on what the other one is by Pacific Group. And then the second one we focused on Meadowview Place, Coldstream Commons, and Truckee Artist Lofts. And you're our third one. And so we do record each of these, and they are on our website. If anyone wants to go there and visit and see the old ones. And we will have this recording posted hopefully by the end of the week, Haley, to answer your question.
Great. Yeah, I share, or rather, Jan, I share your desire for this project to be all electric. I have to tell you, the process of figuring that out has been really fascinatingly difficult. You know,
Ground source heat pumps, that's an interesting to see. That's where you're looking.
well, yeah, I mean, and we're actually looking at, through another program Sierra Business Council manages, a regional ground source and air source heat pump initiative in order to assist communities in meeting their electrification goals, right? But man, the programs just are not there yet to really incentivize them. So it's a struggle, I have to tell you.
Keep pushing.
Okay.
Well, so that's actually a suggested topic for a future lunch and learn is home efficiency projects. And so again, thank you everyone for joining us today. And if you have any suggestions for topics, please include them in the chat box. We welcome your feedback. We'll send out an evaluation after this lunch and learn. And we can add them to a future lunch and learn, because as much as this is about getting information, we also want to provide this opportunity to you as community members to be able to ask questions and to get information that you're interested in.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, well, thank you so much
Bye.
again, Steve and Daniel, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, thank you.